Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and today we're doing a little bit of a memorial for a luminary and to explain how this individual has affected map and game design from the very beginnings of Dungeons and Dragons, and to dispel a myth that has been spreading around the tabletop community for generations that makes zero sense because it was never intended or designed to be that way. It was just limited mental thinking. So what am I talking about? Today we're going to talk about maps. And in the doobly-doo below, there are links to Dungeons and Dragons classic maps, the gridded map idea that came about in the very beginnings of Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy gaming. We're going to talk about that and what this individual has done for our community. So Janelle Jacques, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, has passed away, and they were someone who was into both role playing and an artist and in video game design. And there was an individual that wrote a blog known as the Alexandrian that coined the phrase "Jacqueing a dungeon." Now, to their credit, they didn't want this to be named after them. So the Alexandrian ended up it ended up changing names. But the point is that there is a type of map design that rewarded players for exploring. Now, I understand that there's a perfect reason why dungeon maps continue even till today as a standard, and we're going to get into it. So first, I'd like to um, do a little bit of explanation. So I did pull up a chat here. I see you guys. Thank you very much for being part of the show, being live here. And Caligula's Palace Live says orcs and goblins in one room, zombies and ghouls in the next. Never explain why the undead didn't eat the humanoids, and sooner or later, trolls and ogres come out and never explain how they can fit. If you've here's the thing, that kind of dungeon design actually didn't exist. It it came about by people reading a dungeon and assuming that, hey, you'd open a door and the monsters were just waiting in there, and you walk down the hallway, you open up the next door and there's monsters waiting in there. But if you've ever actually read those old school dungeons, yes, there were monsters assigned to rooms, but with if you've actually read them, they would list first, they'd have a not first, but they would also have a random monster, like wandering monster thing, and then it would give you details about, listen, the kobolds live in area 1 and the trolls live in area 2 and the undead live in area 3, and that the dungeons, and this is the Jack Quang of the design, was that they weren't sitting in rooms, they would wander around, and some of those creatures had conflict with other creatures. For example, the undead might have been, the way the dungeon was designed, trapped in one section of the dungeon, and the kobolds were there constantly monitoring to make sure that the undead couldn't get out. And so there was story elements, and when you had wandering monsters, those wandering monsters literally were the monsters wandering out of the room to go feed, go hunt, go take pot shots at the goblins down the other end and things like that. There was a story reason. Now, mind you, you also had page count and limits, right? So you couldn't literally draw a map inside of it that was miles long. You had to fit it on an 8.5 by 11 page, and so there were some size constraints. But the idea that there were just monsters just waiting in rooms, waiting for people to open up the doors, and the ecology and all that kind of stuff, like how did these monsters even eat, and how did they get past their own traps and stuff? Those things were in the dungeon. So yeah. Yeah, it's nice. It's like underground corridors or perfect masonry. Somebody must have built that. Exactly. Listen, part of it was adventure, and the reason why dungeons still exist is because by bounding, it's not just a bounded accuracy. We hear about that in 5th edition, but it was bounding the choices of your players. So, for example, if you've got players on horses and you show them a world map and go, "Hey, where do you want to go?" You're asking for yourself trouble. But if they're in a hallway and they see a door, and then there's a hallway to the left, and then there's like debris to the right, it bounds their choices into an area, and thereby enhances the horror of a place. Meaning, like, you can't just run out the front door. Sometimes you get so far into a dungeon, it's difficult to get back out of it easily, and it's very easy to prep. They're either going to go down corridor one, they're going to go into room number two, or they're going to inspect debris number three. And therefore, by limiting their choices, it helps us come up with additional materials and to not have to read much further into the dungeons and things like that. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Shai says, my 8-year-old mind didn't register these details, but still, did they ever explain who built the underground tunnels? Sometimes. Sometimes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Taste a bit out says, no need to explain vampires as a dungeon boss. Yep. Yep. Just feeding on their underlings, or just having going to sleep and whatnot. So I'm going to show you guys, I want to show off a bunch of dungeon generators and free maps and things like that. And many, for those of us that are very visually oriented, a lot of these maps will spark us a creative like endeavor, like, oh, now that I've seen a map that I had never seen before, these are great ideas that I can use and add into my game. So very quickly, they're also, like I said, all the links to this are down in doobly doo. So let's go with a classic luminary. We are going to Dyson's Dodecahedron. This is everybody who's anyone knows of Dyson Logos, and if you don't know Dyson Logos, you really should. Dyson Logos is a cartographer. This individual has been around forever. This person makes their living making maps, often hired to make maps. And one of the best things that Dyson has done is Dyson has a Patreon. You can get access to maps. You can get access to high-res digital maps, physical maps, and things like that. And over time, Dyson, after a map has sat for a while, will release it for free. Well, Dyson has released commercial free for use over 535 maps. And so here, let's see if I'm going to page down a little bit. It's going to be kind of fast because each of these maps is a high-res map. So you're going to see on your screen a bunch of maps. I'm going to stop it at a couple randomly as we go through here. So let me find one. Let's pick this one. All of these maps are released for free and tag commercial map. And I can get into some more detail, but you'll see, let me click this to see if you get it even larger. Here is a side view, a cutaway view. There's some stones outside. There's a rocky tower. There's some empty space up above in this stone monolith or something, and then an underground area. And then if you click it again, you get into a lot of the detail here. And all of the maps are done in this manner. Let's go back a little bit. Here, go back one more time. There we go. And like I said, 535. Look at this thing. This is wild. This is a you want to talk about a hedge maze or something like that. That's crazy to make that by hand, or to design that on a computer or something like that. But yeah, all these maps, boom, 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 on and on and on and on and on and on, and you could just grab any of these, whether you want to use them. I've found quite a number that I felt as a sci-fi head would fit very well into that. Sometimes we'll take a project and do like multi-level maps, isometric maps. It just goes on and on and on. It's crazy how many maps. And these are released commercially free. So you can grab these absolutely for your tabletop experiences. You can grab these, any of these maps. Let me grab this slider here. And it's crazy how many maps are available. So if you are You want to be inspired with a map. You want to find something, a map that your players have never been through. You want to find a collection of maps, whether they are city maps, ruins, anything like that. Yeah, go over to Dyson's Decahedron, and the Dyson's logos dot blog, and you'll find all this stuff. And right here, every month we go through our back catalog of maps, and the many patrons over on Patreon vote on which two should be re-released under the free commercial use license. For older maps, I also work on upgrading the quality of the scan where possible. So that's you want to talk about something given to the community that's sweet. Definitely come over here and peruse this person and even sign up for the Patreon. All right, I'm going to slide back up to the top to reiterate that these are commercial maps. You can actually use them if you intend on being a publisher. All right, let's go over to another one. All right, so let's see what our people have to say here. Ooh, CM17. The Yanking says it doesn't have to be an underground tunnel. A penthouse suite can be a dungeon if you're trapped there with kobolds and puddings are wandering around. Yeah. Dungeons don't need to be dungeons. They could be, for example, you can absolutely use them for heists. So they happen to be empty during a festival, but this place is completely populated. Doesn't need to be underground. It can be in, like the other day I was talking about sailing ships. They could be the upper floors of a palace. They could be like they don't need to be dusty. They don't need to be crypts. But there are ways for us to think outside the box for them. Yeah, ruins of castles. Okay, they don't have to explain that, but you know what kind of dungeons I mean. You've all played Wizardry, right? Yeah, yeah, I know. SamY7, yeah, SamY7 RPG makes great dungeon maps. He posts them on Facebook every week. Yeah, I remember Samwise. Is there like a level 9 mage spell create dungeon or something? It feels like it though, doesn't it? Taste. It's like, wait a minute. After a while, like, are all these like which brilliant designer decided to create dungeons and just left them empty for people to move into, right? Shit lords, like, yeah. It's called Mordenkainen's Conjuration of Hack and Slash. Yeah. Puddings in the penthouse. That's hilarious. But yeah, so this is one location. Now let's go to another place. Let's go visit. Let's go over to Donjon. Donjon is a website dedicated to plenty of other generators of sorts. I just happen to have landed on 5e Dungeon Generator. There are many other generators off to the left on this page. You could go over to fantasy, and it's fantasy name generators and world generators and calendars and all those kind of things. And as you'll see, as I show you some of these other dungeon generators, you can pick the level size, the party size, what kind of motifs there are, and all of these are pull downs for you to modify what this dungeon looks like. So, for example, if you want to change the dungeon size, you can go to tiny, and tiny, medium, large, etc., gargantuan. So let's go to tiny. Dungeon layout, you can pick rectangular and others. Let's go to a box type. Do we want peripheral egress? Let's pick many. We could pick room layout. Do we want it symmetric or dense? Let's pick dense. Do we want room sizes? Large. Let's go to small room sizes. And you see how all of a sudden it just keeps changing and changing and changing. Let's make that medium because you can barely see that. Do we want to polymorph rooms? Let's put yes. And then do we want standard doors, corridors, remove dead ends? Do you want stairs, map style, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Now, mind you, this is a generator, so you may have to play with the pull downs. But if you need something on the fly, you can absolutely do this. Now, mind you, looking at this, even with my brain, I'm looking at this like, this doesn't make too much sense unless, of course, maybe this is like the bottom floor of a massive mansion, maybe, or something like that. So if you use the pull downs and start maybe we want to make this a medium-sized dungeon. Let's make it rectangular. Let's get these rooms. Let's get the room um, symmetric, because maybe that makes a little bit more sense. We want the room size. Maybe let's make them huge so we have less rooms. Um, let's put some standard doors. We have straight corridors. Let's remove. Let's make some dead ends. Maybe. Let's take out the stairs. Things like that. And eventually, you can manipulate this to get to what you want. Let's go to another website here. Share this out. This is called Mythweavers. This website has a number of things other than dungeon generators, but this is old style dungeon generation, and of this one has the pull downs, so you can modify what kind of dungeon you want, the width, the height, the room counts, the randomness, the sparseness, what kind of level. This is absolutely OSR style, and you can generate a dungeon. So if you click generate dungeon, I didn't modify any of the above pull downs, but you can just click generate dungeon, generate dungeon, generate dungeon, and move that on and on. And again, with my mind, I don't particularly like long corridors in dungeons. I feel like unless it's a cave system, it kind of makes my mind go. But we're going to get into the Jacqueing of dungeons right here, and then as we move forward. So one of the design methods, if you take a look at this, and it's a little difficult to see, the old school dungeons, the OSR, you used to see a symbol where a door would be. It would be either the letter S or the letter C. The letter S meant there was a secret door, meaning like you would walk in a room, and if you looked at the wall, you may or may not notice that there's a way to open it. It was completely secret door, something that blended in and you could not see it. A concealed door was a regular door, but it was covered up with something, a tapestry, a wardrobe, a bed was moved in front of it. It may be a carpet over top of a hatch in the bottom of the floor, something like that. It was concealed. Maybe it was concealed by accident, maybe with something fell in front of it, or maybe there was water dripping from above and it just looked like it's just covered in mold or whatever. But a concealed door is slightly different than a secret door in the sense that it wasn't meant to be concealed. It just so happens that there's something in front of it, or maybe somebody moves something in front of it. And the reason for that was that if with exploration, as players, you were rewarded for exploring the dungeon, and that reward was you were able to bypass some hazards. Sometimes bypassing those hazards actually got you, I want to say, like behind the scenes. So sometimes you would even find a corridor that had where you could view into other rooms to see other monsters, like maybe playing cards or eating or sleeping or what have you, or planning a raid against other monsters in the dungeon and things like that. And then, of course, there were clues. Maybe you didn't know that there was a Medusa, or you didn't know that there was a Hydra or something like that, oozes or whatever in the dungeon. But if you found the secret door, the concealed door, it would lead you behind into an area with treasure, with other passageways to get you past those monsters that where you would get killed very easily. And it also meant that you could run a dungeon multiple times with different people, and they would have a different experience if they found or didn't find a passageway. So we're getting out of Mythweavers, and we're going to move over to what about itch.io? The link is in the doobly-doo, and this one again is a random dungeon generator. And of course, right here we have Palace of the Diamond Messiah, and you see that there's a dungeon here. There's some numbers for some of the rooms and some details. Okay, now all you have to do is refresh the page, and it will give you another. Let me refresh the page here. and it'll give you another dungeon. And you can go in and actually change the parameters of this dungeon. And mind you, of again, looking at the dungeon, it's supposed to give us you don't need to take this as verbatim, right? This is supposed to be something to go, oh, I'm getting sparked of getting a spark of imagination. So, for example, in this room number 2, it says remains of a knight apparently killed by pigs, a weird, slightly humming object in his hands. Or number 1, a lavishly decorated gate with 3 keyholes on the northern wall. And these details, sometimes like keyholes and sounds and things in rooms, should lead you to other things in the dungeon. So, for example, like, okay, there's keyholes. If you look into keyholes, what's there? If there's water in the dungeon, where is it coming from? Is it being used, you know, by denizens in the dungeon? Is this a place where the denizen of the dungeon uses room for waste or storage, or they're, you know, captured individuals, or their mounts when they leave the dungeon and things like that. Like here's room number 4, a locker holds a crown-shaped key, or room number 3, a pile of rubble hides a crown-shaped key. And you could tell, well, wait a minute, crown-shaped key here and here, is that on purpose? It's just a randomizer. Let me create another one. Oh, this one says Haunted Sanctum of the Spider Lady. For several centuries, the Sanctum of the Spider Lady was considered lost. Currently, it is infested by goats. The Sanctum of the Spider Lady is a place of growth of a rare species of flowers. Um, Currently, it is infested by goats. Absolutely comes across as random. So let's make another one. And mind you, you could keep it and just, you don't have to use it as is. But yeah, Plague Fang Chambers. And again, a number of things. We are on watabou.itch.io. Let's go back and to see what you guys have to say. Yeah, Shitlord says the dungeon has a bathroom. Obviously, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-mm. You know he's an evil mage. He just makes dungeons. That's just what he does. Like, I don't care who moves in. I'm the Frank Lloyd Wright of dungeons in the fantasy realm, just making strange dungeons. Yeah, Mordenkainen's create dungeon bathroom of Loth. I don't know if you'd want. I don't know if you'd want to sit on that thing. There might be like 8 legs reaching up and touching you on that one. All right. Let's see. We've gone to the one-page dungeon over here on itch.io, and then I think that's enough to show you guys a little bit of that. So, the Jack Quang of dungeons, as I said before, in the design, both in video games and in creating dungeons for the OSR, the idea was that you wanted the players were rewarded for exploring the dungeon, and exploring it meant finding hidden spaces and corridors that led you around some of the dangers. Because remember, in OSR, you got experience points for gold and treasure, not for killing monsters. And so, I mean, you did get it for killing monsters, but it was a little too dangerous to do that. If you could avoid the puddings and the oozes and the other denizens by going through back passageways and crawling behind in secret doors and fitting down tight corridors and going underneath a room or going into a passage that led above or whatever, or taking a small boat across in a cavern that had a lake that no one could discover it because of a cave in or something. It allowed you to bypass dangers, go further, deeper into the dungeon, maybe come across some treasures like that water breathing potion that you didn't know you needed until you came to a flooded part of the dungeon and such. So, yep. Yep. Drew says, I sadly have a migraine today, but at least it is on a day in which I have not much to add to the topic, since dungeons are not really my thing. Here's the, and sorry you feel that way. And I mean, sorry that you feel bad. And I think dungeons have gotten a bad name because of they're not for everyone, but I also think that we in the community have given them a bad name when they weren't designed to be that way. A dungeon is essentially a confined space to tell a story. It doesn't need to be underground. It doesn't need to be made out of stone. It's basically a limited set of parameters so that the players understand what their choices are. Do I go forward? Do I go backwards? Do I go left or right? Do I go down these stairs, or do I climb up a shaft or something? And by limiting the choices, it's not railroading, because they can choose to go back and forth wherever they want. But at least when prepping on a grid, hey, listen, the next session, all I need to, or if I'm reading a dungeon or I have my notes, I only need to know 1 or 2 rooms ahead. I don't need to, you know, have 15 NPCs prepared. I don't need to know what's down in the southern territories of my world map, because the players decided, even though last week they said, oh, we're going to go up north into the frozen tundra, and all of a sudden they just decide to turn around, and now I have to prep the entire southern portion of my world map. In a dungeon, the prep is shorter, it's more confined, and also it allows us to act and react on what the players do. So you have a confined space, the players make a lot of noise, of course it's going to draw denizens from other parts of the dungeon. And the players' actions themselves, especially in so-called mega dungeons, their actions themselves are going to dictate which factions they are going to interact with. Maybe by the PC's own actions, they activate something else in the dungeon, and those damn wandering monsters are going to start wandering through the dungeon, which ramps up the dangers. And so I think it would have been best for it. This is the non-sexy part. I think it would have been best for us, when dungeons were created, to create versions of them that were specifically non-dungeon created. So an abandoned town, seaside town with a bay, is a dungeon. It just so happens that they're not underground. There's a bunch of empty buildings. There's maybe a dock. There's a city square. There's a tower maybe to one side that looks out across the bay. It's nighttime. Maybe there's storm clouds on the horizon. And each of those buildings, despite the fact that may or may not be connected, there could be a hidden passageway maybe underneath one building, or what have you. Splitting the party, the players going from building to building to investigate why this seaside town is empty, things like that. That's a dungeon, in a generalized sense. So yeah. Taste of Banana says gelatinous cubes are meant to keep the dungeon clean, right? So is there a waste management mafia that controls the gelatinous cubes? I hope so, because it kind of sounds like it. And of course, like gelatinous cubes and all those kind of things, they're very Gygaxian, right? There's no real logical reason for them to exist except for adventurers going into dungeons. It's just like mimics and rot grubs and things like that. Yeah. And all the what would you call all the camouflaged monsters? For example, there was like except the mimic is the most popular one, but there was one that used to sit on the floor that looked like a carpet. There was one that was on the ceiling, would drop down from the ceiling like a blanket on top of you. Stalactite monsters known as piercers, the stalagmite monsters known as ropers, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, like Shai says, dungeon prep is shorter. You can say that again. Yeah, it is. You got a couple of rooms. The next game, the players are going to go forward. You only need to prep another 2 or 3 rooms, and so on and so forth. Keeping in mind whatever the theme is of your so-called dungeon. Now, the passing away of Janelle Jacques has brought a lot of attention. I'm going to read a little bit of an article here. I don't want to get in trouble. YouTube has been tapping me when I've put some of this stuff on screen. But this is a article over at PC Gamer. And legendary D&D and video game designer Janelle Jacques is getting a memorial mega dungeon built in her honor. This was published 22 hours ago. So Return to Perinthos will be a crowd-funded book of dungeon adventuring with profits benefiting Jacques' family and the charity Trans Lifeline. Even if you don't know Janelle Jacquet's name, you've probably explored a tabletop RPG dungeon she created or played a Quake level she designed. The legendary designer and developer's death last week sparked all manner of tributes from across the industry, but none seemed so perfectly fitting for her legacy as a new attempt to crowdsource a memorial mega dungeon in her honor. Return to Parenthos is being put together by tabletop designer Violet Ballard of RV Games. The plan is for people to submit content for it over the next 2 weeks, whether that's fully written and illustrated sections of Dungeon or just component parts like maps and map keys that can be fleshed out by the organizers and volunteers. Once entries have been gathered, a crowdfunding campaign will be launched to collect it together into a book and have it printed, with all profits going to help Jacquet's family with medical and funeral expenses. After that, profit from future sales of the book will be donated to the charity Trans Lifeline, very appropriate given Jacquet's devoted activism for trans rights. And so, yeah, mega dungeons in this individual's name. Kind of a cool idea, actually, to be honest with you. Those that are in the tabletop RPG realm tend to not have lots of money. Retirement plans, life insurance, health insurance, and all that kind of stuff. When you are a contracted individual, very difficult to have those kind of things. So money going to families and such for that purpose makes a lot of sense. Family and friends and such. So yeah. Drew says, even though I watched the videos from the Alexandrian, I did not know about that Jacquet's dungeon thing. I guess I will look deeper into what that is. Mind you, I could be wrong, but from what I understand, the Alexandrian coined the phrase Jacqueing a dungeon because of Janelle's ability to design both video games and dungeons that rewarded bypassing things and moving around, basically uncovering secrets and clues when adventuring. And that type of dungeons that remove the linear style of the dungeon to allow it to be used over and over again, to have different experiences, really, really drew the Alexandrians mental fuel and was like, hey, reached out to Janelle, and Janelle was like, please don't name it after me, for a number of reasons. Janelle wanted to protect their name and identity, and also didn't feel like an individual that has learned from someone else. You really sometimes you don't want to take the credit for doing something when you've learned from other people. So despite the fact that the last name, and I know I'm butchering it, Jacquet, has been around, Janelle didn't want it to be named after themselves. So yep. Shai says, no use for a mega dungeon, but I would donate, and it probably would be fun to look at. I would like to know who's going to donate to it. Maps, who's writing for it, things like that. I would guess that a number of luminaries would be part of it, and I'd put money to it. Sure, I'm not a big despite having an old school soul. I'm a big OSR kind of like. I have that in me. I'm not really a mega dungeon person, and I feel like the dungeon has gotten a bad name because of its misuse. Because the origination of the dungeon, part of it was limitations, right? You have graph paper, so the graph paper only gives you so much space. You have to promote, like if you're going to make a module, how do you confine the space down so that the players aren't confused, as well as limiting some of the choices, and then making it dynamic enough to travel through? Well, by using the now appropriated Alexandrian way, what you do is you have methods for players to bypass, move around, navigate through, rewarding them for exploration. And I wish we really embraced the idea that a dungeon doesn't have to be a dungeon. Right off the top of my head, if I wanted to make like a D12, D20 table that's non-dungeon dungeons, I would say that um, any town, village, city, state above ground would absolutely be a dungeon. Meaning like you have streets and passageways and alleys and things of that nature. If you want far more exploration, um, having someone who a place that's not vacant but in use could also represent a dungeon. Absolutely using them as a heist, meaning like someone who has a mansion, a castle, um, a hedge maze acts as one with like, the the foliage has been cut smooth so that you have people running around through the hedge maze, but the hedge maze is like twice as tall as the people that are in it. I don't know how in the fantasy realm they're cutting the bushes absolutely smooth, but whatever, right? Maybe they're doing it by hand. You can make many excuses as to why a place is vacant. Like maybe there are, let me go back to the docks again, right? A warehouse could be, an air quotes, a dungeon by having boxes stacked up. And mind you, um, things like warehouses, mansions, um, ships, empty ships, ships filled with cargo. Um, um, Oh, you could have a battlefield could absolutely be a dungeon with siege machines that are burning or turned over. Any place that has confines the spaces of the players. So, um, I'm thinking of the Grand Canyon and places with mesas and plateaus with rocky outcroppings that's hard to navigate around if you're down deep in between the caverns and crevices and such. That counts as dungeons. Now, the fact that some of these places are like, why are all the hallways absolutely flat and straight? Why are they exactly 5 feet or 10 feet wide? Old school, each square was 10 feet. Modern day, they make it 5 feet, but it doesn't matter. Like, why are they all exactly the same size? And that's just silliness. You can come up with any reason you want for your own, the reason why a place like that would exist. Like for example, here in me being in Ohio, Central Ohio, north of us is Lake Erie, and up there's a place known as Perry's Cave. So there's an island called Put in Bay. You can go to the island. It's basically a place to go get drunk and things like that. They have a lot of bars and such. You take a boat over, they call the Jet Express, and you go over to Put in Bay. In Put in Bay, there's a place known as Perry's Cave. During Sorry, oh, excuse me. During the Civil War and War for Independence and such, Perry's Cave is literally a cave that you can go down and investigate, and um, supplies and armaments and things were put down in this cave in this island during the Age of Sail. And it is a place literally you can explore today. Couple of bucks, you go down some narrow stairs that lead down to a cave complex and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Drew says Nakatomi Towers, absolutely and obviously, um, absolutely a dungeon. It absolutely is, right? Any modern day, any kind of like sewer system, any kind of railway is a dungeon. Airports are excellent. Factories and foundries are excellent dungeons and things like that. They don't need to be empty locations with monsters stuck in rooms that are only waiting for PCs to get there. If you've ever seen, here's a good example. Um, classic classic Indiana Jones, right? So let's go for the first movie, Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. And in Indiana Jones, first of all, it opens up with Indy going into a dungeon with a whole bunch of traps. We know that part. But later on in the movie, we see excavators trying to uncover a hidden location in, like, I guess it's like ancient Egypt or something like that, right? That's a dungeon. Now, the upper surface is populated by a bunch of people trying to find out where this location is, but that's still the same thing could happen in your world. Maybe someone is trying to uncover a crypt or build one or fill one with the um the the living and or dead retainers of a great king and queen or something like that. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Sorry, not Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom came to mind because I remember listening to something earlier. Yeah, it was Raiders of the Lost Ark, which actually is weird because Raiders was actually in chronological order was later, and the other movies became earlier, which is weird. Yeah, yeah. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Sheesh. The best one is well. Some would say that it wasn't the best one, but I think so. You start out in the inn, get drunk, wake up in the basement with a mad hangover. That's it. That's your believable dungeon, replaced with rats in the corner. Yeah, exactly. Um, again, um, the 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 purpose of many dungeons was like wine cellars, places to hold prisoners, storage locations, things like that. Maybe a place for a religious institution to hold valuable artifacts and books and things of that nature. And they don't need to go down either. A tower can go up. And if we take a look at let me go back to Dyson logos and to go back to the commercial maps here. Let's go find a commercial map that let's see if I can try to find one off the top of my head. Like, look at this. Okay, let's take a look at this. Like, would someone really design it to look like this? No, unless maybe they were eccentric. So yes, maybe kind of. But you could also come up with some very fun arcane ways of thinking like this. Like, would this maybe this heart is a cave complex dungeon from the body of a dead goddess or god of love or something, right? Or maybe a very powerful, eccentric individual created this for the love of their life, a place for them to go to get away from everyone, but now it's been abandoned or something like that, right? Very bizarre, but sometimes kind of cool. And if you ever take a look at Dyson's maps, while seemingly some of these seem to be um, like definitely cave complexes, other times you'll see something strange. Like, look at this one. This seemed, the classic floating obelisk, the obelisk, tower, island, or something. How cool is this to have to be able to get to it? You have to cross over, and then here we have section number one. Then we have section number two with little floating platforms around it. So section one is the very top level. Two is the floating platforms with maybe an outlook area. Section three, and then we go to 4, 5, 6, and 7. And adventure wise, do the players enter in on say level 5? Which I think, yes, I'm going to say they enter in on level. That's the entrance on level 5 here. Yeah. And let's go to the vertical map. Yeah, right there. It looks like the opening is right here at level 5. And so now the players can decide, okay, so they enter into this floating structure at level 5, which absolutely positively could be sci-fi, right? Where do they go? Do they go up? Do they go down? And then right here, right in the middle, down with a down arrow and a U up for an up arrow. How cool is that? Is this anti-gravity? Is there a ladder? Is this an elevator? Like, what is it? And the question is, I don't know. And so it's up to us to decide what structure is this? Is this because for me, I would use this is commercially usable. So I would love to use this for Obsidian Star as a science fiction kind of anti-gravity thing that shouldn't exist, but it does anyway. And this is just one example of using a map to spark your imagination. That's not really a classic dungeon. I'm going to move very quickly here. We've got towers. Of course, we have things. Where's some above ground stuff? And especially some of Dyson's, excuse me, some of Dyson's um, cities. Some of these are built like crypts, others are abandoned. Some of these are city maps with things. Some of them look like absolute castles. Like, let me grab this one here. Um, there we go. This looks like something that is being used currently. So is this a castle or well protected mansion or something? Are these, I mean, right from this image that I can look at, it looks like three separate buildings, all with different things and structures in them. So is one a guard house? Are these three homes down the street? Is this a is this a neighborhood or something? Who knows? I like the idea that this may be someone's neighborhood, and these are three homes, maybe made out of. It doesn't even need to be made out of stone. It could be made out of other materials local to the area, and the players are like, "Hey, someone's been kidnapped, and you use this for Call of Cthulhu. Which home do you go into first? Do you turn the lights on? What's going on here?" Um, let me go. Let's find some more, and then I'll get back into what you guys have to say. A bunch of hex maps. Here's a city map. Definitely a city map by a water source. You can decide on the different neighborhoods, who lives on the outside of the walls, who has access to get inside the walls. Looks like he's even placed some sailing vessels. You can start naming some of the various neighborhoods. Maybe up to the upper left of this map is for far more industrial, working class, what we know sometimes called blue collar neighborhood. Let me click it to make it larger. So that might be like a blue collar neighborhood. There's an inlet area. So maybe this constructed larger area here, maybe a tower or lookout for sailing vessels that come into the city. Of course, you have your individuals that come off the docks in the kind of neighborhood that's here. Um, how easy is it to get in and outside of the city? And all of these things, is this a residential area? Is this more business? Where's the rich area? Is the rich area on the outskirts? Is this a place where visitors come and set up shop? Maybe as a warehouse district, things like that. And so I love maps that give me enough space for my own imagination. And so, yeah, maybe a couple more here. Sorry, moving very quickly here. Trying to find something. Up there's something that looks like a classic pyramid. Yeah, I'm not going to go through that one. Uh, um, Here's another multi-level location for any number of reasons. Um, it looks like this is a tower built on a an escarpment or something. Maybe that's water around it, although it could be lava. You can make it acid. It could be sand, a sea of sand and dust, or it could literally be an open sky. And then you of course, you have your ground level opening and your levels that go upwards and upwards. And this absolutely could be populated. Like if you're running a heist, absolutely positively can be populated by individuals that are like, hey, you're climbing up the outside of my castle. I can actually see you, that kind of thing. So, Shit Lord says blue collar dungeon. So the ghetto dungeon is just a few streets down. Yeah, yeah. Says, oh, tasteless. Thank you. Says, oh yeah, an Obsidian Star dungeon. That's what we've all been waiting for. Right. Well, I think those dungeons would be starships, mobile mining machines, spider crawlers moving across the surface of like Mercury or something like that. Yeah. Shitlord says, I'm going to find that believable dungeon tomorrow morning. I hope you do. It's kind of silly, but you guys get the point, right? The thing Locations that are currently being used, I think, make the best dungeons because the whole point of the dungeon, and then you can come up with a reason why it's empty. Maybe it caught on fire, it was flooded. there's contention over who actually owns it. So the people were forced to move out, and the PCs have to sneak into it very quickly. Here's another one. I love when uh, Logos Dyson Logos does a side view, so you can get an idea of what's there. Like for example, this looks like a maybe it is a um, there's a well, and this could be some kind of mill or storage unit or something. No, it looks like more like a mill with a tower, and then there's a location below it. So on the bottom left side of this, with below the side view, we get the upper portions of this thatched tower. So we get the maybe living quarters or eating quarters, and a place that goes up. Oh, that looks like a telescope. I'm sorry. That looks like a telescope. So yeah, it could be an astronomer or something. And then there's a another building. Maybe it used to be a well that leads down into like a cavernous dungeon. And then on the left, my cursor is moving around a little letter that says S. There's a secret door and allows easy bypass. So yeah, absolutely. Spiral stairs. On the right side, there's a spiral stairs that lead down from above, and then where's the well? There's the well. Upper right hand of this map, there's a circular area and an S, and there's a little well that goes down. Maybe the well goes down. Yep, to the left at the bottom. There's a bucket. He drew in a. Let's make this bigger. Yeah, there's the bucket. Kind of cool. Anyway, so wanted to share this out to you guys, and basically do a shout out to somebody who unknowingly affected my journey through like Dungeons and Dragons from the OSR till today. So Caligula says, okay, that would be more believable for orcs and zombies coexisting, especially if they were separated, right? And if we want to be honest with ourselves, you know, it's easy to destroy a thing, right? Oh, that sucks. But it's better if we just come up and just be more creative and go, well, why are there zombies and orcs? Maybe the orcs don't want the zombies around. Maybe the orcs inadvertently released the zombies in the first place, which is why the damn crypt was shut away. And now the orcs are like, okay, we need to close the doors and put some debris in the way. And maybe the orcs could really use some help getting rid of the undead, right? So we can make a story. Things don't have to be static in a dungeon. The dungeon itself could have maybe 3 weeks earlier was opened up and the PCs came across it. Maybe there's a rival adventuring group that's also trying to delve into the dungeon, which is disturbing things ahead of the player characters. The player characters going like, is there somebody ahead of us? Like tripping all the traps and opening up doors, releasing monsters and stuff. And like, sure is. Shai says, you know what happens when you look through the D&D dungeon telescope, right? Yeah. It looks right back at you. Yeah. And King says, this was really cool. I appreciate it a lot. It doesn't make for a very good podcast if you can't see what we're looking at. But the point of it is that by using dungeons basically confine our player characters. And if you like a little bit of horror, confining your players into a limited space is a great idea. The other part of a dungeon is that by confining the spaces, it limits the choices, so that if we have to prep something on the fly, or we are preparing something, if you want to be a person who wants to design your own dungeons, you want to become a publisher, confining the space allows you to create materials that other people can use that isn't so generalized that it's kind of useless, so for example, if someone was to steal the idea of having an abandoned small town with a bay that used to have a lot of shipping traffic, but for some reason, the water levels or something happened where there's a bunch of ships that crashed upon the rocks, and those sailing vessels are now being used by like pirates or bandits or undead or aquatic creatures or whatever. And each of those things, maybe there's like 3 ships, one of them is half sunk, there's docks, there's a couple of empty buildings. That's a dungeon. And when the players investigate it, you can have written in the margins and things, hey, if the players are making noise or casting light into the town, the enemies that are hiding in the ships are going to sneak upon the shores and try to attack them and find out who they are. Or maybe they're not going to attack them at all. Maybe they're just going to sit them, climb on top of the buildings and watch them from above and see what they're doing. Maybe the players that can go down into the there's a mercantile tramp freighter or something that wants to come into this bay, this abandoned bay, and recover lost goods that were lost at the bottom of the bay. And they see the adventurers and they're like, are they going to steal our stuff? It belongs to us. We're the scavengers here. And then there's some kind of conflict or something like that. So yeah. The Living Dungeon with David Attenborough. Yes. Lifestyles of the Undead and Goblinoid. I can't do the accent. The End King says, in the Warriors, every single gang held a meeting to hear one guy talk. Even though none of those gangs had thematic cohesion with each other, dungeons could be similar. Exactly. I mean, now, mind you, it's also safety, right? Goblinoids getting kicked out of the human lands. The necromancer that wants to experiment and using their deviant magic things. Maybe they come to an agreement. Like, listen, we're going to gather together here. You guys stay on your side. We stay on our side. And mind you, that truce doesn't have to be 1,000 years. That truce could be like 5 days old. And the orcs are already trying to sneak over to see what the hell this necromancer is doing, right? So things can absolutely positively be in turmoil. Hell, a dungeon could actually be currently being built. Like someone with a lot of money and a lot of influence could say, oh, I want to excavate this. The dwarves are like, no, I want that excavated. Oh, no, we had a cave in. Everybody out, you know. Hey, adventurers, could you go in there and figure out, maybe it's literally a construction site the players need to go into and rescue people. Or there's a crypt of the Mad King, and everybody knows the Mad King was like despicable and like punished their own people, and the people were like, we don't care if you desecrate that crypt. We didn't like this person anyway. And the PCs were like, okay, well, we'll just tell you what, we'll make sure all the evil and dangerous stuff is out of there as long as we get to keep some of the goodies. And the population's like, do whatever you want. Just, we're tired of being besieged by all the evil spirits that are in there. Or you're going into the dungeon to appease evil spirits. Their restless spirits were disturbed by thieves that tried to break in earlier. And the PCs are like, okay, listen, we have ourselves 5 ancient items. We have to put them back, appease the spirits, close the door when we're done. We're not in here to kill everything. We're actually in here to dodge all the evil things that are going to harass us, the banshees and the shadows and the ghosts. And then we're going to go through the dungeon and put things back the way they are. Right. So it's all kinds of stuff. Shitlord says, so Space Dungeon in Obsidian Star tomorrow? Maybe. It actually sounds like a good idea. Maybe. June says, the grand reopening of the dungeon is next Monday. Every adventurer is welcome. Exactly, Drew. Now, here's another thing as well. I'm going to pick with Drew a little bit. For those who like a little bit more story involved instead of just like hack and slash and running through things, the classic, this is a very noir storytelling trope. A bunch of strangers gather together to go into a home. The doors are closed, and for 24 hours overnight, everyone must stay here as someone tells maybe ghost stories or something, or it's known to be haunted, and everyone on a dare is like, well, we're going to gather here as a dare. Or a very wealthy and powerful but eccentric relative, there's going to be a reading of a will, and everyone must come here. And somewhere on the far countryside, you have to travel in an old Model T Ford or something up a road, and the gates creak open, and you get there, and you're there amongst a bunch of other strangers or family members that you didn't particularly like anyway, and they're going to read the will, but you must stay here for at least 24 hours inside the home. You know, yeah, sounds like uninvited. Yeah, yep, exactly. And then the PCs are there with a bunch of other NPCs who could be adversaries or enemies or something. So we can have a lot of fun with a classic style dungeon. Also, liminal spaces. Dungeons don't need to be physical spaces. They could be the the player characters work for an agency that helps people overcome their psychological issues. And a small child has been suffered some great trauma, and the player characters must put on a machine on their head to go into the mindscape of a child traumatized, which is a dungeon, right? So dungeons don't need to be literal things carved into the earth down into the ground, right? Um, they could be one shots. They could be someone's dreams. They could be anything like that. Here again, I'm on itch.io, and or actually watabo.itch.io. I don't know how to pronounce that. um there's other things. There's like cities generators and things like that. You can also support the generator here, and you can actually go into the more of the shortcuts and things like that. But yeah, all you have to do is refresh this page. Haunted Monastery of the Dark Witch. Let me refresh it again. Forlorn Vault of Akara. Refresh one more time. Fortress of the Cursed Witch. And again, all of these. This doesn't need to be underground. This could be part of a religious institution, and these are classrooms or something. This could be a vault with ancient texts and writings. This may be a place where monks go to with vows of silence and to ring bells or things of that nature, so on and so forth. And mind you, you could use these prompts such as number one, a battered wooden door with a keyhole on the eastern wall of the chamber. Well, it doesn't look like there. Well, maybe that would be the northern part. There's some steps down in here to number one. Looks like there's some water down here. Maybe that could be a ooze. That could be something that was spilled. And then you use all these just as prompts. Yes, there's these hash marks all around this dungeon, but those hash marks don't need to be like it doesn't need to be earthen. These could be hallways in an above ground location like a college or a dormitory or a university or something. This could all be like outside, and the hash marks are like bushes, overgrowth, something like that. If this is underground and you have steps going down, um, or this could be above ground. I could see this being put into like trees maybe, and all of these are open platforms. This If this does go underground, again, this could be like a wine cellar, a library or laboratory. Maybe this location was above ground, and then um, earthquake, landslide, mudslide, or something covered it over, or something of that nature. Any number of things. This could be created as a safety shelter from dangers from above, much like a prepper's place to be safe from nuclear war or civil unrest or something. This place could also be that way as well. So, oh, did I not share it out? I didn't share it out. Shit, I'm an asshole. Okay, here we go. Let's do it again. Fortress of the Cursed Witch, Mountain Library of the Dreams, Sunken Catacombs of the Undead Messiah. That sounds relatively specific. See, this even to me, this looks like an alleyway and a narrow streets or something like that, rather than a dungeon. But yeah, this could be underground. This could be above ground. Let's make another one. Let's see. This is called the Ebon Skull Asylum. Ooh, an asylum. Yeah. Doesn't look too asylumish. Looks like a 5-room dungeon to me. Um, but yeah. So anyway, long story short, come up with some great ideas. Um, Liminal. It's more than just a meme. Yes, I've heard the term liminal space, like a a a confined, I guess, kind of described as a confined space, but it's not in a physical location. It sounds like a typical weekend in Lagos. I know I butchered that. Or Clue, the motion picture. Wow, yeah. Professor Plum in the library with a candlestick. Asylum dungeon, kind of like Berlin. Stop it, you guys. Stop. Anyway, thank you very much for allowing me to share this with you. This was also a way for me to honor someone who had passed away that I'm not very familiar with, or didn't realize I was as familiar with this individual as I was during my the beginnings of role playing and such. I got into it back in the 80s or early 80s, so like red boxing type of era. So I got into it back then, and I didn't realize this individual had that much influence on me back in those days. So thank you, Janelle, Jacques, for giving us, or giving, at least giving me, something to chew on through my mental journey, a minefield that I've gotten over like 40 years now, and I wanted to share some uh, dungeon creation things out there for you guys, and to kind of rethink what a dungeon really is. I hope someone out there looks at some of these like dungeon generators and makes some that are not specifically dungeons, but they're generators to tell stories in other locations other than that. Especially those of us that are like into modern storytelling. You know, Call of Cthulhu. When I say modern, 1900s all the way into the far future. Sci-fi dungeon generators, things like that. So I hope some people come out with those. I'm sure they exist. I just don't know where they're at, or maybe I just didn't look them up. But guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for letting me share this out with you. Next week will probably be a week of Obsidian Star and some of the things that I've been developing for this free RPG. Just giving it away. I don't really care. I have no interest in part-timing job functions that are full-time jobs in the tabletop role-playing experience. I really don't want to do those things. So giving something away for free is a whole lot easier. Again, lastly, guys, have a great day. I will see thee tomorrow. Thank you very much for spending your valuable time here. I hope in return I'm able to make some change. Guys, have a great one. Peace and tranquility.